Alright, so I had to get a little creative with this lesson plan. I do apologize that this is how I'm having to film, but repeatedly I had filmed on Tegrity and it just didn't work. So here is the next best solution for this. So this is my lesson plan. It's a social studies lesson adapted for an ELL student, and it's by Haley Reynolds, and it's for my EDUC 380 course on teaching English language learners. My ELL student's background. This is my ELL student background. Her name is Lily. She's a female. She is 8 years old and in 3rd grade. She arrived in the U.S. in January of 2015 from Nepal, and her native language that she speaks or spoke is Nepali. Here's Lily's proficiency. This is my adaptation of her proficiency chart. For the most part, she is in between. She's mostly expanding. That's what her proficiency is. She ranges from bridging to all the way up into reaching. So for listening, she is a level 5. She's bridging. For speaking, reading, oral language, literacy, and comprehension, she is a level 4. So she's expanding. And her writing is actually really, really good. And she's at a level 6, which is reaching. And her overall score is a 4.4, which is expanding. The lesson plan I chose for this PowerPoint was from a unit. It's an introductory lesson, the first lesson in a unit plan that I created this summer for my summer block courses. And it's on social studies. It's a focus on pioneers or westward expansion. And the main thing that we look at is we're comparing life in the past versus now. So the standards I have for the overall, for this lesson actually, would be 3.2.3, which is to record observations in the form of journals, drawings, or charts based on simple investigations. And then the next one I have is SL.4, which is to report on a topic or text, tell a story or recount an experience with appropriate facts and relevant descriptive details, speaking clearly at an understandable pace. My objectives for this lesson, because it's an introductory lesson, we're focusing a lot on background knowledge. First we do a KWL chart and we fill out the no portion of the chart. So I really wanted to focus on drawing on what the students already know before we learn about the topic. So I would be asking about the characteristics of a pioneer. And the I can statements for this are: I can share my ideas of pioneers, I can draw conclusions based on facts and details of pioneers, and I can write about pioneers using my knowledge and what my classmates shared. So first, we focus on sharing their ideas, then drawing conclusions, and then finally writing. And I put my I can statements in the order of how we will be completing different tasks in the lesson. So first we'll be sharing our ideas, then we'll be able to learn new facts and then draw conclusions of not only what we already knew or what our classmates knew, but also the new information that's presented in the lesson. And then finally, to reflect on everything we learned, we will be writing about what we learned. So throughout this lesson, I had different forms of assessment. My first form of assessment was done in a KWL chart, and we are filling out the no portion of the KWL chart. And this was an assessment I wanted to use to get a better understanding of what all of my students knew, what their background knowledge was on this topic. So we're focusing on interactions and communication in the form of discussions. That will help me get a better understanding, and it's a form of assessment that I'll use. And finally, the last assessment, so I can assess what the students took away from my lesson, is a learning log. And the learning log I use throughout my whole entire unit. I feel like it's a great tool to use to practice writing, sentence structures, grammar, spelling, but also to reflect on the lesson and what we learned, and just kind of close our thoughts. And as you can see right here, I have form that I would use. This would be kind of like the learning log I would use. It wouldn't necessarily be exactly like this, but what it focuses on is right here we have, oh, I do apologize, that was probably very loud for you. I'll hold it. So right here we have the topic, the big idea. And this is what we would put in here are the characteristics of a pioneer or westward expansion. And then the first column, you'll see that we have what I learned. And in here, you can either draw, you can write what you learned, you can draw a picture, whatever you feel is best, whatever the student feels. I love that this is a creative form of an assignment. It's not constantly writing. So you could switch it up. One day you could be focusing more on writing, the other day you could be more lenient where they could be more creative. So this first column here is what I learned, and then the following one is my reaction. So this kind of closes it. These are their final thoughts and what they learned. The assessment for Lily. For this, I really wanted to focus on one-on-one communication and interaction. I thought it would be best for Lily to have, ideally myself, but that's not always possible. Me as the teacher is what I'm saying. But if I was unable to work with Lily, I would like a para or another teacher or somebody an adult who would be able to talk with her and interact and listen to her and get ideas of what she's trying to say and what she learned. So I feel like the communicating is what's best for her at this point. Discussing one-on-one with an adult, and through this discussion or this interaction, we would be able to assess what she learned from the lesson and what she already knew. So it's another form of assessment for me to get an understanding of where Lily is at with this topic, with pioneers. Does she have any clue about what a pioneer is? Did she have anything similar in her history when she was back home? Has she learned about it before in the previous year she's been in school in the U.S.? This is my time to really get a feeling of what she knows. We would also be doing a vocabulary word review. I feel that it's important to first talk about it, but then also to review. She's a student who came from another country, who did not learn English. Now she's in a new setting, but I feel like it's first great to learn about it, but then to review, to really drill that idea or those concepts into her head. And then for the learning log as well, I think it would be beneficial to discuss one-on-one with the adult before she went into writing her facts, so the adult can help her kind of narrow in on what the best things would be to write about. And discussion is key throughout this. The communication, the interaction, and the discussion part are what really helps me get a better feel of what Lily knows. The vocab words that I used in this lesson were pioneer, adventure, cargo, stamina, and westward. So throughout this lesson, these are the vocab words that we're focusing on in this lesson. But throughout the whole entire unit, we have more vocabulary words. And what I wrote up in my unit plan was that we would have a word wall. So as we learned a word and their definition, the vocabulary word, we would then be able to post it to our word wall to reference later. So not only is this great for Lily, for her to be able to see and reference the words throughout the unit, but it'd also be helpful for the other kids as well. The materials I would need for this lesson would be chart paper, smartboard, a PowerPoint, which I do not have attached, but it was a part of my unit plan. If you would like me to attach my PowerPoint, just let me know. I can certainly attach that. You would also need markers and the learning log booklet that you created for your students. The hook and hold I would use for this lesson would be a prop. I feel like this lesson involves so many discussions and thinking, and it's new, that I don't want to give everything away right away in my hook and hold. I'd rather have a prop that I can show my students to introduce the lesson that they have to think about. So they can ask, what do they think our unit will be about? What do you think of when you see this covered wagon? Just to get ideas from the students to get their brain working. The procedures for this lesson would be to start with a pre-assessment, so a KWL chart, which I touched on earlier. What we would be focusing on for this lesson, since it is an introductory lesson to a unit, I would be focusing on the no portion. So you could have chart paper by your spot. Preferably the way I like to do these kinds of lessons is on the floor. So carpet space near an easel and a chair so I can sit and be close to the students and we can discuss and I can write. So I like them close so they can visualize it better. Another way to incorporate the students more would to be to print this form off or this paper, and the students can reference it later. So as I'm filling out the no portion of the KWL chart, the students could be sitting on the floor with a clipboard and a pencil, and they could also be writing down the facts and details that the students are able to come up with before we start the lesson. And then what would be great is we could file this away in a folder and be able to pull it out throughout the whole entire unit and touch on the what I wonder and also the what I learned portion of it. I would also need the PowerPoint. The PowerPoint is roughly, I say, 20 to 25 slides. So it's in depth. But what's great about the PowerPoint that I used for this unit was that first it introduces what westward expansion was, what were the pioneers, but then it also has a slide for every single vocab word with its definition and pictures. So this would be a great thing to share if you have Google Classroom or something like that with your older students. Once again, this is 3rd grade. So this would be a great PowerPoint that you could share with your students that they could reference later. And it would be, I think it's just a great tool because it had the vocabulary words, the timeline of westward expansion, along with the different members of it, such as there was pioneers, prospectors, there was the gold rush, Lewis and Clark, Sakakawea, Thomas Jefferson, all sorts of important people that I feel like it'd be great to have that as a tool that students can reference throughout the unit. And then also there was a gradual release or a learning log, which I touched on earlier. To differentiate this lesson, I would draw, this is focusing on Lily. Oh, I do apologize. That was if you didn't see that, there's the KWL chart I was pointing to. It's a little difficult recording with my phone. I do apologize. To differentiate this lesson for Lily, I would draw on her heritage and culture. So I would want to relate this topic to her past home life, to the country she used to live in. I want to make it relatable for Lily so she can get an understanding and be able to learn this, understand this topic and this idea. So I would ask her to share stories of her culture or the history from her culture that would be similar to that of the pioneers. I would do this, I could either pull her aside before the lesson and offer her an opportunity to get an understanding before we even began, so it wasn't something totally new coming at her, or I could, after some students had given some ideas of what they already knew on pioneers, then I could explain to her. That would give her some time to think and process, and then I could come to her and ask, is there anything back from your heritage or your culture that you would think is similar? If not, then we would just go with the lesson, and I would plan on working with her more one-on-one and doing more informal types of assessment to really get a better understanding of if she is comprehending what is happening in our lesson. To differentiate the learning log, I spoke of this on another slide. I would want to work one-on-one with her. I feel that's very beneficial for her because then she's not alone. She's not sitting at her desk trying to process what's happening, thinking of what she needs to write about. She has the comfort of another adult sitting by her, helping her through it. So the communication alone is what I think is very important. So she's able to discuss, bounce ideas off of her para, myself, and just collaborate with me. Just bounce ideas back and forth, and then we would be able to discuss what was important, what should we write about, what are some key facts and details that we feel we need to write down so we remember, and then also to translate words if necessary. To differentiate the classroom, I would focus on, I would have bilingual books and labels. I will be honest, the bilingual labels was something new to me. I had never thought of this. I have never crossed it before, but it's it's genius. It's a simple thing, but it's actually really, really helpful for her. Just gives her another way to be successful in my classroom. Another thing that would be great would be to have a translator if necessary, if the school can provide one, just to help her with words and help us communicate better together. This would also depend on Lily's ability in my classroom. I feel like she's able to, for the most part, understand most of the words, but that translator could be a comfort to her. Technology for translation as well, which would be helpful, and then also the use of sounds to grab attention. This is not only helpful for Lily, but I think for all students. In the classroom, we tend to talk a lot. We tend to redirect with our voice, and I feel like using a sound like a chime or a bell or a ding on your smartboard can offer a break from their mind from having to, like when we say class, class, they have to say yes, yes. And I know eventually it just becomes routine. I know one that I use lately is beep, beep, and they say honk, honk, and they really enjoy that. But I think the use of sound to grab attention is also really helpful. In conclusion, what I think is best and what I've learned from not only this lesson plan but also from the whole entire course is that I must adapt for all students. Not only my lesson plans, but everything. If I feel like a student is struggling, rather than let them struggle and be stuck in my ways and not helping them and being focused on only doing it a certain way, that's detrimental towards the student. I should be able to adapt in order to help them and help them be successful. I should also be willing to differentiate any and everything, which also kind of goes into adapting for all students. I shouldn't be stuck in my ways once again. I need to be able to think of ways to teach a lesson more than one way. So all of the learners in my room, all of the students in my room understand what is happening and they can be successful. Another key thing that I've known for a long time, but it's still very, very important, is the get to know your students. Build relationships with your students so they feel like you care. There's nothing worse than having a teacher who is solely there to teach. You need that connection with your students, a professional connection with them, in order to help them learn and be successful. And also differentiate across the whole entire curriculum. Don't just differentiate lessons. Offer other ways for the students to be successful, such as the labels for Lily. So, this is my lesson plan. I do apologize that I had to use my phone as my recorder. Once again, I apologize for dropping my phone, and it wasn't the best form of filming, but I needed to get it in. So I do apologize. Thank you once again for being willing to accept this. And this concludes my lesson.